everyone. Welcome back to the MHP Show podcast. I am your host, Derek Vickers. On the MHP Show, we talk about anything and everything that has to do with mobile home parks, trailer parks, whatever you want to call them, about the operations, crazy stories, and we just get into a little bit of everything here. And so I've got another guest with us today. And if you're in this industry and you don't know this guy, or you never at least heard of him before, I mean, I don't know if you're living on the moon, under a rock, in a cave somewhere, but I have Mr. Glenn Esterson with me. Glenn is with Marcus and Millchap. And correct me if I'm wrong, you said that you guys have done over $1 billion.
About $1 billion plus or minus, depends on, if you include equity and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, we do a lot of deals, it's,
yeah.
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's 10 figures. Any way you cut it, it's still a big number.
It's not chump change.
It's not. And I'm excited to have you on the show, Glenn. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Derek. I'm excited to be here. Sorry about my attire. I'm in my Friday, getting ready to go have fun for the weekend clothes. My youngest kid decided to play hooky today, so I'm kind of dealing with him a little bit. And it's a little more of a relaxed atmosphere in my home office on a Friday usually. So
no worries.
I promise I have a suit and nice hair and all that stuff too, if you need to see me that way.
So Glenn, I'll tell you, I used to have 30 to 50 suits when I was in the insurance business. And every day I wore a suit and tie every day. And then after I got out of the insurance business, I was like, fuck this. I'm getting rid of these things. So I probably have maybe 10 suits left, and I wear them only on special occasions because I wore them every day for 9 years.
I just took probably 10 suits to Goodwill, just a couple of weeks ago. It's the same type of thing. I used to, for years, be stuck in a suit every day. And I don't know, I got lazy as I got older. The more success I had, the less I wanted to wear a suit. So I'm usually in jeans and a sweatshirt,
Yeah, for sure. So you've been in this business for a long time. About how long you been in the business?
I bought my first park in 2003. I've been brokering deals since 2000, and I've been exclusive to MH brokering 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there. And I no longer own parks. I strictly just broker parks for clients. I don't like to compete with my clients. I don't like hearing about, if it's such a good deal, why don't you buy it, kind of thing. So I stay away from it. I invest in other real estate verticals, and I primarily invest in businesses. I buy businesses and things like that often. And that's sort of where I spend my time. But in the MH world, I have reluctantly learned as much as I know how to learn about this industry, and being an owner operator to a good old fashioned trailer park in, BFE, Tennessee back in the day, I learned a thing or two about how not to do things. And that's, that was the bane of my existence for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And I it's funny how you say that you learn what not to do. And people ask me like, oh, how did you guys scale so quickly? And I'm like, well, I screwed a lot of things up in the beginning.
Yeah.
I did a lot of stuff wrong. And
the learning curve is steep.
Yeah. Yes, it is. There's no question about it. So what made you buy that first park? Was it just like you just fell into it, or how'd that happen?
I had made some money for the first time in my life in selling some apartment buildings in 2000, 2001 in South Florida. And I had my first 6-figure check ever. And it was like going from poverty to going to actually having money. And I said, I'm so rich now, I'm going to retire. And I went and bought a farm, which is what my life mostly had been before Florida. I'd done a lot of farming in my life and lived on farms and just dreamed and drooled about being a farmer. And so 25 years old, 27 years old, I said, I can do it now. And I went to Asheville, North Carolina, bought a farm for like $1,500 an acre. And I was out in the boonies, like boonies of North Carolina. And I couldn't figure out how to make money being a farmer. So it was challenging. The little bit of scrap that I had left over from that check, I went and said, I need to buy some kind of real estate thing, because that I actually knew how to make money with. And so this realtor called me and said, hey, there's a trailer park for sale. Would you be interested in that? And I pretty much just hung up on the guy. And then he called me back, and a couple of times later, he got me out to see the park. It's about 30 minutes from my farm. And I said, okay, I kind of understand it, but I don't understand it enough to give you, my money on this. So I waited like another 6 months. He called me back. He's like, please just take a look again. He's going to give you a better price. He'll finance the deal for you. Take a look at this thing. Take a look. I must have been the only guy in 100 miles that was looking at this thing or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually I said, okay, did not do any due diligence. Big first mistake. I looked at the park. I said, okay, they look occupied. The guy told me he was making however many thousands of dollars a month. And I said, okay, we did a handshake deal. And 30 days later, I closed on the park. He financed me for an entire year. It was so nice. One whole year of finance.
Oh, wow.
Didn't realize how hard it was going to be. It wasn't like a single family house that you can just go get financing super easy. And I had a real hard time trying to figure that one out. But in that 1 year, I watched this more or less stable, dirty birdie type of park, but stable as long as you stayed on top of people, produce. And it was making more money than my farm was making. I was a mushroom farmer, of all the crazy things to be in this world. I was a very large mushroom farmer, but still couldn't make good living on it. But I loved it. It was my passion. The trailer park I hated, but it made better money. So I ended up spending a lot of time in the trailer park, and, in time, for a few years around all right, but you could see the slippery slope it was on. And then the recession hit, and all bets were off. Luckily, I had just finally got the seller to give me some extra time. I got a loan at some crazy interest rate and got it refinanced in 6 or 7. That finally gave me a little stability there. But then the recession happened. And, it was a 5-year note. So I think I had a loan due coming in 2011 of all times to have to deal with, refi. And the city decided in their genius to expand their city limits. I was just outside of the city limits, and
which is always better, by the way.
Put me into the city limits and forced all city limit people to be on city sewer. And I was on a septic that was working perfectly. And so my nightmare became extremely real in around 2008, 2009, and, almost turned me upside down and left me for dead there in 2011. I still don't know how I did it, but I went out and got a tractor and dug all these ditches and put in all these sewer lines myself. I spent like 90 days at the farm digging trenches and putting in pipes. Never done that before, so it was an interesting learning experience. And once I got the park, and during that time I had a revolution at my park. I got one crackhead in, and the crackhead, spread like wildfire. And before you know it, it's like a 40-something space park. I had like 30 crackheads living there. And so I had to evict everybody. And my homes were trashed. It was an absolute nightmare. It taught me exactly that I never want to do that again. And so I found one smart guy that said, why don't you just give the trailers away? Just give them away and turn them into lot renters. And I'm like, but my lot rents are $75, and my home rents are only like $350, but that's good money on those homes for me, despite the fact that I'm spending a gazillion dollars to repair them all the time. He showed me the light, this guy, and then he took over management, and I paid him 10% or whatever. My life got so much easier. A year and a half later, new tenant base, everything was stable. It was all TOH, and I had public sewer finally put in. And I said, just let's sell this thing and be done with it. And it took about 2 years to really get it sold. I put it on terms, made my money back. I somehow was made whole, and I was somehow left with a very interesting experience, still wanting to be a farmer, not wanting to be a landlord. I have a real hard time collecting people's rent. I'm not the right guy to go and collect your rent when you tell me your mother's got cancer for the 4th time this year. And it's real hard for me to try and get my $75. Eventually, I took my rents up to a whopping $150, and that was an incremental process for sure. But that was sort of my deep dive into MH ownership and my apprehension to ever be responsible for a family's housing responsibilities again. And, that I didn't like that part. I liked almost all other aspects of it. I didn't like that part. So eventually I got a manager, not the same guy, but a different manager. He did a real good job with my park. And he was the ball buster that was necessary to be there to keep everybody in line and to take care of things. And eventually, when he died in the park, and he lived there. He had a heart attack and eventually passed. And when he died, I said, "Okay, I'm 100% got to sell this thing." And that's sort of what said, "Okay, I don't own a park, and I'm not a good farmer. What was I good at?" I said, "I was pretty good at brokering apartments. Let me go see if I can do that again." And so I went. Applied with Marcus in Atlanta and was ready to make a big life change. It was 6-7 hours away, and 5-6 hours away, whatever it was. And I said, "I'm going to, if you hire me, I'll come do apartments." And they said, "We'll hire you, but you're definitely not doing apartments." And so they put me into doing like industrial stuff. I was pretty good at it, but I didn't like it. And then an opening came in on MH, and I said, I'll do this MH thing reluctantly because I can at least talk the vernacular, and I have some funny stories and things like that. And, here we are today, 10 years later, or whatever it is, and it's been a really interesting process. Still don't want to own any trailer parks, but it's been a really interesting learning curve for me as a broker, and I pretty much just follow what I've always known. Just be straight with people, tell them how dirty things are, and see if you can scare them off. If they don't get scared off, maybe they're your guy. So it's kind of worked out well. I have a pretty great team now, and I've trained some really great guys in this industry that have gone on to come, do bigger things too. And it's been a really, really fun process. I'm pretty much neck deep in this industry now with, not really understanding what else I would do other than trailer parks anymore. No longer the bane of my existence, but now it is my existence, it feels like.
Yeah. That's an interesting story, Glenn. And it seems like when you got your first park, you got into that reluctantly, and then you started brokering parks reluctantly. But what was it? I mean, you wouldn't have been in this asset class for, I think you said 14 years or something, brokering it.
20 years now, brokering for, 10 plus years parks, but brokering commercial deals 20 plus years now.
Right. And what has kind of kept you in this asset class? Like, what do you like about it?
I think at the core of who I am, I'm like a salesman. I love sales. I love doing a good sale, where it's like everybody's got to take a little hit, but everybody kind of meets in the middle and everybody gets paid. And, you're left with maybe a sort of a sour taste in your mouth, but 6 months later, you're like, no, this worked really well. I'm going to call that guy back and he's going to, be happy to hear from me, and so that the salesman side of life, I've been selling gumballs in grade school, and all the way up since then. So that part I really like. And now, I had so many good friends in this industry. Some of my best friends are now in this industry. I've helped exit so many people out of this industry who then became some of my best friends. And, I don't know where else I'm going to get that. That's pretty great stuff, And so, was this the dream I had when I was a kid? No. But am I pretty satisfied with how things turned out? Yeah. And the guys in our industry are the so interesting people, like the mom and pops,
for sure,
the syndicators, the institutional guys. It's such a neat dynamic of personalities that it gives me my fill of interesting things. So
yeah. For sure. I mean, I actually went and met with some sellers yesterday, a mom and pop, and it just amazes me how they had their financials, they're writing on that green, the paper with the little boxes on it. And they got it there. They had it all ready for me. And I'm like, in this, they were very organized, and I was actually impressed with their operation. But it's really interesting, the people that you meet and the backgrounds that they're from, and the heart that some people actually put into this business. Because I've met with owners where they just don't give a shit about the place anymore, which is sad. Yeah. But it was cool to see that these people actually genuinely cared, and there is a mix and dynamic of culture that you meet.
I've had sellers reluctantly invite me in to come meet with them, and the first thing they do is they put their gun on the table, and and it's just like it sets a tone, And I've had sellers come and like fly me out to like North Dakota and have me stay at their ranch and spend a couple nights with them and understand what they're doing. And, you know, you hit it off, and like, I don't see them all the time, but every few years we run into each other at a conference, and, you know, it's like, we're still buds, you know. And I've had to put my foot, you know, I've been invited to come to a meeting, and I'm knocking on the door, and he's like, "Oh, you're that broker," and he's trying to close the door on me. I literally have to put my foot in the door and be like, "Give me 5 minutes of your time."
Yeah.
I made that guy a bunch of money, you know, 2-3 months later, you know. And it's, you know, there's a passion I think you have to bring, at least as a broker and probably as a buyer owner, that you have to bring in order to get above all the other nonsense these guys are dealing with. So they'll hear you out, they'll see your vision, you'll be able to talk to them like they're not just a paycheck. And, you know, like that, you know, seems to go a long way. And if you have the ability to trade fun stories with people, that really just, it sets people at ease, and it makes people understand it's not me versus you. We're just two dudes trying to make a deal. And, you know, it's like one of the best advice I ever got was from one of my old bosses. He said, you know, it's just think of it. It's like two guys at a bar. You just two guys at a bar talking, you know, like the most casual conversation is going to produce the best results most of the time for building up the rapport that you need to get people to let you sell their biggest asset, $10 million, you know. And, you know, and then you have to ask for money in return and then be able to ask for a big fee in return. And it goes a lot better if you're able to really relate with these clients and really become a friend with them. Now, you can't be friends with everybody, and some people are just difficult and you're on opposing sides. But as a broker, you should be able to find some middle ground as often as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, like where you, just, this is from my observation, like you have a down to earth personality. Like I'm from the sticks of Virginia. Like I'm not, you know, my family wasn't wealthy. My dad still works a blue collar job. Like trust me, like we're not wealthy by any means. And so like I can relate to these sellers. I can talk to them like not from an ivory tower. I've never gotten my hands dirty on something before. And I think you're the same way. And that's huge when you're talking to these people.
I think so. I think people want to be relatable. I think they want somebody that can understand that even though there's 40 years between us, you know, like you might be 80, at the time I might have been 30, but we can still have an intelligent conversation. And despite my, you know, sometimes offensive appearance, you know, big beard, tattoos, and I don't dress so well most of the time. And, you know, we can still really connect over. Farming stories go a long way in our industry with these mom and pops. I mean, they really do, because almost all of them grew up on a farm at some point, you know. And you know, talking through just my path and my process, which is not some scary process when we're talking about selling a deal. It's, you know, it opens up a lot of doors. And now that I've got a lot of gray on me, it's almost even easier than it's ever been to talk to people. And it's you know, it's a really interesting dynamic, and I don't know where else to go. I see my friends with better jobs, or maybe, you know, easier jobs or better. I don't know how you look at it, but they don't necessarily make the kind of money they wish they were making, and they are still stressed out. And so, you know, I figure any job you're ever going to have is going to be stressful. If you're going to try and be any good at it and make money, it's got to probably be stressful. So here I am. I tried my passion farming. I couldn't make, you know, nothing being a farmer. And, you know, I was stressed out all the time also. So, you know, this seems to work pretty well for me.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
People come to get hired by me all the time. And literally the first thing I tell them is, if there's anything else in this life that you think you would rather do, go do that first. Because once you come into here, it's like absolute misery the first 3 years trying to be a broker, and it's the next 10 years just trying to prove yourself, and then maybe you start enjoying the process at some point. But for, you know, it's that whole tell them no a few times and scare them off and see if they come back, because that person might actually be a good broker, be a good owner, be a good whatever. The 10 years it takes to get good at this business, to get really good at this business, you know, you could have gone to dental school and been a dentist and make $1,000 an hour first day out of school, you know? So, you know, it's, you know, it takes a special personality, I think, to stick with this kind of business. And the broker world, there's a lot of really great brokers with totally different personalities and totally different ways of getting to the finish lines. And some are really good, and some are my good friends, and some are maybe not so great, but they do very well. And, it's neat that success is allowed in multiple variations here in this business of ours, because nobody was looking at it. So it's almost like, an open territory where it's not everything's all modulated like an apartment kind of deal where it's very prim and proper how you structure these things. And in our world, you're dealing with books and records written on paper in pencil.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be a bit more creative to figure out how to get that thing done,
For sure. For sure. And it's interesting you say that about, the 10 years that it takes to get successful at something. There was a quote I read somewhere, but like it was talking about how when, man or person reaches their goal, they then get disappointed because they realize what they actually enjoyed was the game in getting to that level. Yeah. And so I think there's something to be said about, so sometimes I'm going through stuff and I'm like, God, like this is rough, but like I still keep going and I love it. I'm like a glutton for this thing, and the pain, the rewards are so great. And I love the game, although it sucks sometimes when you're in it. But I think you're right. I think you do. That's great what you said, how you try and weed people out, because unfortunately the society, that's the way people are being raised now. It's like, hey, it didn't work for me in 2 months. Like I'm giving up.
Right. It's very much like that. And for me, as the guy who's training you, I'm literally putting in 1,000 hours a year into you, like an absurd amount of time for you to make it to 1 year and your first decent check. And then say, okay, with this check, I'm done. I'm not doing this again. And I'm cutting bait, because now you just lost, a lot of time and all this future business. And it's, it can be a frustrating aspect from my side. I mean, it really hurts my feelings when I lose an agent to anyone, really. If they don't stay with me for the rest of their lives, my feelings are getting hurt. And it's kind of how, this business really is, because it's so relationship based. And the guy that you bring onto your team that creates new relationships with other people that I haven't quite connected with yet. Well, that relationship with that person, if that guy leaves the team, I'm not going to be able to pick up that relationship immediately, maybe sometimes, but that guy might not have been triggered for 2 or 3 more years to sell, but you left a little too early. Now you're not going to see that butterfly chasing kind of thing that people have is really, really evident in the brokerage world, and especially evident in the MH brokerage world,
Yeah.
Because it's not a fast hit. People see the highlights of what brokers do and they think, oh, that was easy. And they're like, what does it take, 30 to 60 days to get paid? It's like,
no.
Man, some deals literally take me a year to get closed. I mean, from the time that I made that first evaluation for them to the time that the fourth buyer finally got to the finish line, it can be a very frustrating process.
Yeah, for sure. And when I was in the insurance business, it was the same thing, because when I had the big team, I was in charge of recruiting. And so we would put all this time into somebody. The sales cycle was a little bit shorter than, obviously brokering deals, but still it wasn't, they weren't going to get paid next week or even next month. Like, because you had to water those seeds, right? And over and over again. Yeah. And so I used to lose people as well. And it would be like a failure to me. Like, man, what did I do to make this guy leave? But it's just the nature of the beast, to be honest.
Yeah,
really.
It's the nature of it, for sure.
Yeah. So Glenn, what are you seeing out in the market now? I know interest rates have, seemingly leveled out. There's more certainty about the future. Are you seeing, or do you foresee more deals getting closed coming up this year?
100%. I mean, 23 now, 23 was the kooky year,
Yeah.
I mean, interest rates, we just couldn't say where it was going to land. And so, people are still coming off the highs of 21, 3 caps and 4 caps and 5 caps, 2022 kind of balanced a lot of things out for people, but then it gave people kind of nerves towards the end that interest rates were just never going to stop rising. And they just kept going and going and going and going and going. We were getting quoted 8.5% on deals, like, how are you supposed to do that? Right.
Yeah.
And in end of 23, we started getting stable, and Q4 Q3 and Q4 started all of a sudden get more velocity as people tried to deploy before the end of the year. Now here we are, end of the first month of January, and it seems like everybody's like, okay, we caught our breath, we got money. We're not exactly sure how much distress is out there, but we're tired of waiting. And now today, I just read that was it Blackstone announced that the official bottom has been hit and it's all up from here. So true or not, who knows? But that seems to be a sentiment. Okay, fine. Like those big 10 cap type of deduction type of deals did not materialize because we were in a safer place this year, or this last cycle, should I say. So when the bottom did hit, it seems like people were better equipped. Now there's still a bunch of guys with, some floating debt out there and some 2-year timelines out there that are probably still pretty darn nervous,
Yeah.
But a lot of that seemed to be cleared up in the last, call it 6 to 12 months. And the stuff that isn't cleared up, those buyers are now, or sellers, owners, however you want to look at them, are now taking a breath of relief, saying, "Oh, thank goodness, it's not still climbing." At least here at 6%. If you're in my age group, 6% is a good interest rate. That's historically a good number. You can park against it. We can go back to old school mentality of I want 2.5 points of spread above my interest rate. That gets me to this type of return. And from here, we can start making deals. And thankfully, the seller high of 21 has moderated. And now, the 5 cap is not so much the expectation. Now the expectation is still, 100 bips off what a buyer wants to pay, but it's moderated. For a while, there was about 300 bips of spread between what the seller wanted and what the buyer was willing to pay. So we're seeing the math be a lot easier, the pitch be a lot easier, the debt be a lot easier. And now we're finally building up a good pipeline again. We're doing some monster deals. We're seeing a lot of guys that, didn't want to pull the trigger last year from a sales standpoint or in 22 because they know they missed 21. But now 2-3 years, here we are, and they still have debt coming due in 25 and 26. And they say, you know what, this is a pretty good number. This does get us out, and it does say, let's recapitalize and shake loose what we can shake loose here. I think of it, a lot of LPs, I think we're putting a lot of pressure on people there for a minute, saying, what the heck happened to my cash flow? What the heck happened to these returns? What are you telling me? You told me 3-year exit. We're now at year 4 and 5. We didn't exit. You missed the top, pressure. And I think we're seeing a lot of these type of owners, the syndicator type of owners, starting to say, okay, fine, let's make the market happen again. The mom and pops, who knows? The trophy sellers, trophies are always going to be 4 caps, 3 caps, 5 caps, but the average, C plus, B minus stuff, we need a spread, and we're finally back to having a reasonable spread, So our average cap rate for the last 12 months has been about 6.75, which really isn't too terrible. Yeah. And, there's, we just did like a 2 cap in Florida for value adds. I don't know how.
Where?
We also did a 10 cap, recently. So it's like a very big spread of cap rates. But when you look at our last 30, 40, 50 deals, whatever it was, it's averaging at, upper 6s right now on a cap rate basis.
So, I mean, the 2 cap, there was probably a lot of value add upside with that.
It was a value add. It was a big owner. If I said the name, everybody would know him. He's a real good friend of mine. I adore the guy. And he's like, Glenn, I bought this thing. I want you to sell it for me. I don't want to own it. I don't know why I bought it. We think it's worth this cockamamie number. And I said, no, I don't think it's worth that cockamamie number. It's worth this number. He said, well, if you can get that number or better, you'll look like a hero to us. We went out and did this deal. And to my surprise, like we got pretty close to the number he wanted. And, this 1031 type of end of year closing thing. And, it got done. But it was a flood zone. It was like 15% occupied. It was, private utilities. It was everything you don't look for in a deal most of the time. So a 2 cap is funny to say, but it's meaningless almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we bought some stuff, some heavy value add stuff that was probably a 2 cap on the, the mom and pop who didn't care about the property. Their in place cap rate was probably really low, but there was tons of value add upside there.
Yeah, the value add stuff for guys that know how to really do it and can get the homes and can do the cleanup. It's a great deal. Me personally, I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole if I'm a buyer. I'm a time value headache guy, and anything better than the treasury bill looks like a really good deal to me if I never have to think about it. And so, I get tax benefits, I get management in place, I get all these things. I don't have to do anything, and it's better than the T-bill. Please sign me up. I'm fine. But I'm a location type of buyer. And, past
Same.
that, I'm a must have in place management, must be financeable, must be as stable as it can be. And it's upside's too hard anymore, so for me anyways, so I'd rather just go buy, 10 stable things at 5 and 6 caps and just not think about it again, because I know it's going to be sellable. I know it's going to go up, and I know it's going to be financeable. And so that's how I look at things. But guys like you that are doing these big hits, it's impressive. I just don't have the tolerance for it anymore in my life cycle. It's the thought of losing scares me way more than the interest of winning does. So for me, it's a little different the way I look at things. But I help plenty of guys do these 2 cap deals, and there's another big group. We sold some parks in Kentucky for a few $1 million. 18 months later, we sold for $17 million. And
wow.
Some guys really know how to do their upside really well, and we're always happy to help. But I always give my little finger wag warning. Are you sure you want to put all your eggs in that basket? Boy, I guess some people get a lot more open with risk when they're using other people's money. I invest with only my money. I don't use other people's money. I don't partner. I don't do a lot of that stuff. I'll do an LP position. I'll probably a couple dozen LP positions where I don't have to think at all. But if I'm doing the deal, I won't take on partners, because the thought of losing your money would terrify me. It would absolutely terrify me. I couldn't sleep with myself at night if I wasn't able to pay that bill.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. And it's totally true. And what you say about value add deals, and I'm always rethinking the strategy. You were talking about gray, if I let it grow out up here and let it grow out here, it starts to creep in. And I'm wondering if it's from the value add stuff. And, I remember I actually read your book a few years ago before I got into the business, and your time headache thing. I think about that more now. In the beginning, I was just like, screw it, dude. I'll do any deal. I don't care. I'm going to go in, roll my sleeves up. But now it's definitely an inner conversation I have, because is the upside there? Is the risk worth the upside you can get with as much of a headache as this going to be? Because I know this value add shift's going to be a headache with code enforcement, with the health department, with all this stuff.
Well, so use a perfect example of just remember during COVID, how long it took to get homes. Okay. There was a 12-month waiting period to get your homes. Okay. And let's say you were on bridge debt with, 1 to 2 year floating rate bridge debt, and you went and just paid a 3.5 cap in August of 21, because we're gung ho about the industry, and you're hearing all the war stories about how great it is. But then you get told, oh yeah, your 3-month delivery that we told you on the phone might be doable is really like 6 months. Oh, really? Now it's like 9 months. And then you couldn't find the vendors to get these homes set up properly. And then now you got 2-3 months left on your bridge loan. And now you're really scrambling. Now you're probably yelling at your kids more than you like to. You're probably getting fussed at with your colleagues more than you like to. Your LPs are probably going, what are you doing, bro? What are you doing? Where's the thing? You told us this thing was going to be materializing already. And now, thankfully, a lot of people got saved with just how this worked out. But in that situation, that's the time value headache that I'm talking about. It's give me my treasury bill, for me. Because for me, I can scale that pretty easily. It's just I get a lot smaller return, but I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And so that you can't control the supply of homes. You can't control the supply of labor. You can't control when your manager has a heart attack and is no longer able to service that park. You can't control so many aspects of the deal that you're taking on a lot of risk. And, is a 20% return or a 20% IRR necessarily a good reward for that risk? I question if it is. Granted, I'm not the richest guy I know, so you might not want to take my advice. But for me, it's how I look at things, and I I strongly believe, location first, management second, stabilize third, financeability fourth, and then we can talk about maybe doing a deal that has some, upside on it.
Yeah, 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 and it's true when you're looking at these deals. I have people in my program that they bring me deals. They're like, "Hey, Derek, here's a 50 space park for 10,000 a pad. There's only 10 homes there.
Great. Sounds great.
There's only 10 homes there." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, do you know how much money it's going to cost you to bring those homes in? Do you know how much of a pain in the ass it's going to be to find a legitimate mover or someone to actually go in and block and level it correctly?" Is like, because when you think about that, you're like, "Oh, I'll just get a mover to come in and set."
Sounds easy.
Sounds easy,
right? I had a friend. It's a war story, and I'm not going to say names, but he bought a park out of state, used his in-state moving crew to bring these homes to this out-of-state park, set them up to the in-state coding type of set standpoints, not to the new state standpoints. Set them up a little high. They look kind of odd, but that's how they, this guy was setting them up. Now he's dealing with code enforcement. Like he's going to pull all his hair out of his head because every home needs to get reset. Like that's just where you cut the corners on these things, thinking you're smarter than the next guy. It's like that's how they get you, as they say. They use your own arrogance against you and your own ignorance against you on this kind of stuff.
For sure.
The value add deals, 10,000 a pad sounds dreamy, right? But then you got to go buy 40 homes at $50,000 a home. That's $2 million. Then you got to try and sell these homes, right? Or rent them, if you're that guy, but it's a lot of capital coming. What's that 50 park, place worth once you sell off all the homes and have it stabilized? Maybe $50,000 a pad. Sounds like it's a real winner, but do the math, do the time. And if the market turns in that time, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing you said about cutting corners, I think people, if you're getting into this business or you're already in it, like the mobile home park business runs in the gray area on many different things, right? And you can't cut corners because of what Glenn just said. Like you have to do everything the right way. You have to get the proper permitting for stuff. And I've learned the hard way on stuff. We tried to shortcut some things in the beginning. It wasn't big, but not pulling permits and then code enforcement makes your life a living hell.
Yeah.
Right. And then they come in and they hit you for the other 20 things that they were looking the other way on. Typically.
Right. Yeah.
So
or you get a little arrogant with them and then all of a sudden, forget it. They're now no longer even trying to be your friend. 100% they're going to come at you with the hammer, and it's in these small towns all day long. This is how they work. They get offended quickly when some New York guy, California guy, Colorado guy, Florida guy comes into their Michigan place or into the Pennsylvania place or their South Carolina place and tell them how they should be doing it. It's nuts. These guys, but they don't like that. The best way I've seen people do it is that group that I did the Florida deal for, and a few other groups. They go in, they bring in like donuts and sodas and coffee, and they come and sit down and make a hoopla kind of event around it, and really buy that rapport, and that really helps in the long run. It really does. I wouldn't have thought about doing that kind of stuff when I was a park owner. I hated my code enforcer. Me and him were not friends.
I know.
There was no way around it, but back then I had dreadlocks like down to here. I looked like a hillbilly farmer type, and it was a little tough to look at. I have a feeling, especially for those guys.
I'd like to see a picture of the dreadlocks.
Yeah, I'll show it to you. I actually have it on my phone. I can show it now if I wanted to embarrass myself.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Like so we had some issues with code enforcement in a few of our parks, and I ended up making the same parks are in the same town, but the zones were different. There was two different code enforcement guys, and after I took them out to lunch and talked to them, so now if there's an issue, they call me and say, "Hey, this is the issue. So and so's calling." I'm like, "Oh yeah, they hadn't paid their rent in 6 months, so we're evicting them." So typical time to call, right? But they let us know. We handle stuff before.
So much easier. So much
easier.
Yeah.
So So Glenn, what would you say? You got a new guy getting into the business. They're like, man, I get sent deals all the time. People are asking me, where do you find deals? I'm like, well, I find a lot from brokers. I got my acquisitions team, wholesalers, whatnot. But typically, if you're new and they call a guy like you, it's like, hey, all right, how does that person approach a broker being new in the business in order to start building that rapport and establishing themselves as a real buyer?
It's hard. It's hard. I would say I do probably more first time buyers than maybe most brokers, especially at this level that I'm at. Just because we happen to have a lot of deals under $2 million, and a lot of the top broker teams, they're mostly doing larger deals because that's where you make your fees. But just because I came up from the bottom, I have just a resource of small deals that we know how to process. But it's still hard because anybody on my team, we know you as a new guy, you're going to need more hand holding, and you have a very low probability of close right out the gate. So, and we're expensive. I mean, like we're definitely not the cheapest broker team out there, So, where we set expectations is, really like on your first deal, it's like going from like college into grad school before you get your job. You're going to pay the piper one more time, and you're going to go buy this really clean, easy street type of deal, and you're not going to make money. You're going to make almost nothing on this deal, but it's going to be a really good entry point for you. It's going to give you the learning curve at a less steep incline than maybe some of these other deals that other people might throw you into. Usually that scares the buyer away. We never hear from them again. But for the guy that actually buys that deal, he's often, or she has often said that was like actually the way we did it was the right way. I started in the shallow end and then I worked my way to the deeper end. But if I'm a new buyer and I'm trying to buy my first park and I'm using my own money, I'm probably calling sellers directly. And I'm going to go sit down with sellers, and I'm probably buying within 30 to 60 miles of where my house is. Okay. And if I have $1 million to spend, if that means I can only buy 10 lots, then guess what I'm buying? 10 lots, because I want to stay home. I want to stay close to home. I want my location to be something I know so well that if I have to exit, that $1 million is guaranteed. I'm not going to lose it. Yeah. And from there, I can start stretching out. You'll find a better deal, no kidding, by dealing with a seller direct, right? Like 100% of the time, right? That seller doesn't know what he doesn't know. You can kind of run him through the rigmarole if that's your thing and get a better deal out of him if it ever gets closed, right? And a lot of these guys, it's a rug pull over and over again. At least with us, we tell you everything we know about the deal, whether it's, accurate or not, it will be uncovered during due diligence. But at least we set you up to be in a position that you at least know what you're getting into. You're not wasting your time. You might not necessarily love the deal, but you at least know what you're getting yourself into, and you can get a deal done quickly that way. Whereas a lot of time dealing with the seller direct, I'm sure you've had this experience. It's like, yeah, I'm a seller. And then like, a year has gone by before they're willing to sign that contract. And now you got competition behind you because he started calling all those mailers that have been mailed to him. And,
got one of those right now, by the way.
It's that kind of thing. So if I'm using my money, that's how I'm doing. Now, if I'm syndicating money, I'm setting expectations with my LPs and GPs that, guys, I'm not the same kind of owner, operator, syndicator that maybe some of these other groups are, where I'm going to tell you 30% IRR by year 3 and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to probably tell you, I hope we don't go broke in year 1. I think I can return some money in year 2. And by year 3, I think we'll have a hang on this thing that we should start seeing better profitability from there. But I'm not setting yield expectations. I'm setting the lowest ground expectation possible. And if you want to do this with me, you'll have a bigger piece of the pie. If you don't, no problem. We'll get you on the next round after I've proven myself. But then my pie is going to be more of my pie than your pie,
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I would look at it. That first deal is the humdinger. That's first deals where so many people never buy a second deal. And for me, again, best located real estate I could afford to buy as close to home as I could get. That's the first rule in my world of if I'm buying something. Past that, then, you got to really figure out if you're financeable. If you're trying to buy a Fannie Mae loan and it's your first park, you probably ain't going to get it, probably not.
No.
If you're trying to assume some gigantic assumable loan, from CMBS, probably not going to get it, so you have to be realistic about it. In the banks, you're probably going to get stuck with a local bank, 6-7% interest, recourse, all that kind of junk. The down payments are way higher in our industry than people really are prepared for. They're used to thinking 10-20%. And I set expectations 30 to 40%, 35% is really what you should kind of count on. Don't be surprised if they tell you 50% if you're including the homes. So it's, you have to really understand that mechanism of it if you're trying to buy your first park. And if it was me, I wouldn't work with a broker on my first deal, because these sellers, they're going to screw you every chance they get. Just like you as a buyer trying to work with the seller directly, you're probably going to try and screw that seller as often as you can. And then you're going to have some cockamamie deals set up that probably doesn't make sense, and everybody's mad at each other on day 59. So, that's, at least from my vantage point, that seems to happen a little too commonly.
Yeah. Well, the seller, they're, the septic system's fine. Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. Nothing's ever happened with that.
You go there and you see a hose in one septic pouring into a septic that's downhill. Oh, this is my overflow valve.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
Or you see the septic dump truck sitting in one of the vacant lots that they just use as the holding tank, essentially, for all these bad septics,
Yeah.
But on paper, it looks fine. And most people forget to apply an expense to septic as well. They think, oh, it's septic, no expense. Like we underwrite septic deals like it's the South. Everybody's got septic, but there's an expense there beyond just the pumping that shows up on the P&L.
Absolutely.
There's a cost, whether it's been reflected in the last year or two is a different story. So you have to kind of pump your numbers a little bit, $5-10 a lot, as per month, as sort of an expense hold for when that expense actually comes. And most sellers love to tell you this was CapEx, this was turnover, this was this, and it doesn't show up on the P&L, and it's all below the line. And you really got to wonder if that's true or not. And if you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to believe them,
Yeah. And that's an interesting argument, because with our CFO, I used to talk before, like, we'll have a big septic expense. Like, okay, is that below the line or above the line? And of course, my argument is that it's below the line. But to your point, there are going to be septic expenses like that. It's just a matter of when it happens. And you may look at the T24 and there's nothing. And just like you said, you're like, man, this is cheap as shit to run. Yeah. The expense is 20% expenses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have to
replace the seller really believes that a lot of times too. I mean, I've seen it too much to say it's not true. So would you really, industry wide, there's historically been this like optimum number, of expense ratio once you're stabilized, and in the South, we use 30%, as the optimum expense ratio on full maximum rents, full maximum occupancy. And then if you take out all the utilities, you want to be no lower than 25%. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you're up in New York, it's a lot higher because you got higher taxes, higher, different things, right? But each kind of area has an optimum expense ratio when you bring a mark-to-market type underwriting to it. And if you're a deficit in there, almost always it's because you're not expensing some of the private utilities properly. Sometimes, years ago, we would look at it as like, well, if water and sewer in this particular town is $25 for water and $25 for sewer, well, then that really should be the applied expense to the private utilities. However, I don't know. I don't know if I still believe that. I used to think that. Now I really think it's more like a moderated cost of operating expense with the balance being below the line. And it seems to be like $5 to $10 a lot per month for well, and $5 to $10 a lot per month for septic is kind of what you keep at the line, above the line. Because that's otherwise your 30% expense ratio tends to get a little screwy, and so, the other thing in the South we deal with a lot is park-owned homes, like the expenses that you'll see from these mom and pop sellers on these park-owned homes. You'll see 25% expense ratios globally on global.
I've seen less. I've seen less than that.
Yeah, it's a head scratcher. But when you talk to them, at least me, because they know I ain't buying their park and I'm just trying to help sell their park, you can at least understand their logic that they're not lying about it.
Right.
Like this. Well, I have my own maintenance team and they work for another company, so I expense them out through that company, and they sit there and do all this stuff here. Or, I own a trash company, so there's no trash expense, and I run that center through the trash company, and because it's very entrepreneurial type of people, and they often have other businesses beyond just this mobile home park. And they've, from their central standpoint, have parlayed what efficiencies they can from this business into that business and vice versa. So on the P&Ls, it looks cockamamie, and you have to really, understand that what you're seeing is that guy's interpretation. Your interpretation might be 50% expense ratio. And then a guy like me might tell you, well, it's probably around 42% expense ratio on this deal, and then the appraiser guys will tell you whatever they want, whatever you want them to tell you.
Yeah.
So, you still have to be very cautious with that. There was a lot of pretty extensively aggressive appraisals giving, and in 2021, 22, that I think is causing a little bit of a riff with refis today and with sellability today. Mm-hmm. Because, you were just, you pushed your appraiser a little too hard,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Glenn, I appreciate you coming on. I mean, I could sit here and talk with you for hours about this stuff. We'll have to have you on again, or when I get to doing these things in person at some point. Would love to have you on. Well, where can people find you?
It's pretty easy. We got a gazillion different websites out there. Our main one, that's sort of our central hub website that will take you to other parts, the MHPexpert.com. And that is, my advisory company. And from there, you can come over to the deals we're selling, and that will jump you over to the Esterson MHCteam.com website. And on there, you can see all the deals and everything that we do. Simple Google search. I think I am the only Glenn Esterson in this country. So, it's pretty easy to find me on the internet. My LinkedIn is where I'm most active. And if you see me on other social media, I promise you it's not me. It's one of my robots or one of my admins or somebody doing something there. So I apologize if no one replied to you. But LinkedIn, I'm very active on. And best way to get through me is just, hit me up through the website. You can hit me up on my cell phone. I respond to everyone. 423-483-0492. I do my best to call back, immediately, if not within certainly 24 hours.
Awesome, Glenn. Well, thank you. And everyone, thank you for watching and tuning into the MHP Show. We're posting every week. So we will see you guys on the next show. Please like and subscribe. And leave me a good comment if you like the show. It takes freaking 2 seconds, right? And if you have a bad comment, I guess you can leave it, whatever. But leave me a good comment.
Don't be a hater.
Don't be a hater. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Thanks, Derek.